Hi, monsters. It's great to have you all this afternoon and what the digital media and advertising industry might call the winter of its discontent. I'm Gavin Dunaway, editorial director of AdMonsters. It's wonderful to have AAX, Washington Post, and Playwire all here to talk about the revenue boost you could use right now. Most of the media world is suffering as advertisers pull back spend during the pandemic. A heavy burden falls on publisher revenue professionals to find new cash inflows quick. However, there's already an untapped revenue stream waiting for publishers on their own sites. AdBlock users make up a noticeable portion of publisher traffic. If they can be monetized, that's money in the bank. Today, with the help of AAX, Playwire, and the Washington Post, we'll examine strategies for re-engaging AdBlock users and turning lost traffic into revenue. We are going to have interactive elements in today's webinar. You probably see a question box on your screen. Feel free to send us your burning questions at any time. We'll probably save most of them for after the presentation, but you never know. Also, we'll be sending out some polls that we'd love you to answer. All of them are anonymous. Why don't we give one a try right now? So tell us, how do you feel about ad blockers really? Now, while we wait for the answers, let's get to know our main speaker today a bit better. Tim from AAX, tell us a bit about yourself and what you do over at AAX.
Hey, Gavin, thanks so much. Thanks for hosting. Thanks to both Jasons for participating. So my name is Tim Cronin. I'm head of sales of AAX. AAX stands for the Acceptable Ads Exchange. So we enable publishers to serve acceptable ads to their AdBlock users. So we'll talk a little bit more about this option in the next few minutes.
Excellent. Well, so I see the results, and only 12% think AdBlock users are despicable rapscallions. 3% are upset they don't want to see our beautiful ads, but the majority there sympathize because there are a lot of crappy ads out there. So I think they'll find this presentation very interesting. Tim, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you. So the purpose of this webinar, as Gavin talked about, is to discuss new revenue opportunities in today's environment. Specifically, I'll be discussing options for engaging with and monetizing AdBlock users. I'll tell you why the AdBlock user is such a valuable demographic, and I'll propose opportunities to engage with them. And then we'll bring in Jason from Washington Post and Jason from Playwire to add their perspective. So let's get started. So we know the situation, and obviously our economy is taking an unexpected turn. However, adding more or larger ad units is not a solution. Why? Because our industry already has a supply and demand imbalance problem, a problem that led to a rapid growth of ad blocking. So here's how we got here. So if you take a look at 1977, you'll see obviously there were only hundreds of publishers, and basically there were three major television networks that captured majority of the ad revenue. Fast forward to 2012 and the internet economy, and anyone can basically be a blogger, so anyone can be a publisher. Now we have millions of publishers. And if you notice, the number of advertisers really did not increase that much, definitely not to the same degree. So as a result, we have this supply and demand imbalance. And in this type of economy, what happens with a supply and demand imbalance is that the buyers, in this case, the advertisers, move into the driver's seat. And they begin dictating how they want to buy your inventory. And so in this graph, you can see how the number of performance-based campaigns increased, and while the number of CPM or branded campaigns declined. And this is what squeezed the publishers. And in response, many publishers, to make up for any potential lost revenue, they added more ad units, or they added bigger, more intrusive ad units. And as we mentioned before, this contributed to a dramatic rise in ad blocking, or to what Doc Searles refers to as the greatest boycott in human history. So how bad has it gotten? Well, if you look at this chart, you'll see that there's currently more than 750 million ad blocking users. And the impact on revenue, publishers will lose revenue of $35 billion by 2020, and that's been a steady increase of 30% per year.
So, Tim,
Yeah.
if I can just interject real quick,
Please.
I'm kind of tempted, as publishers are feeling their revenue efforts are hurting. I wonder how tempted they've been to reincorporate some of those bad ad practices of the past. Let's see what they say, but please keep going.
Okay. So we talked about the growth and how it impacts publishers. And this slide, I want to talk about how does it impact the reach of specific users. And the number of AdBlock users per publisher or visitors who have an AdBlocker on, it can range from anywhere from 10% to 40%. In this particular case, we're just saying 20% of users would be impacted. So, what I was saying is that in addition to lost revenue, is that what makes matters worse is that this 20%, in our opinion, represents some of your most valuable users. So what do I mean by that? How are these valuable? And so we'll talk about kind of these users, and then we'll talk about the options for engaging with them. So let's learn about these users, and we have a lot of information on them. And this is kind of a complex or a busy chart, but I'm willing to share it after this for anyone who's interested. But why are they so valuable? They're valuable because, well, for many reasons. They're younger, they're tech savvy, and they're well educated. In addition, they're actually making a ton of purchases online. So what's interesting is that these are the users that have an ad blocker. And those are, you can see it in this chart, it's the darker blue. Whereas the non-ad block user is in the lighter blue. So it's amazing to see that actually these ad block users are better or bigger consumers of online media than even non-ad block users. Two more interesting facts on these users. Again, these are ad blocking users, and the truth is, and we've done a ton of research on these ad block users, but the truth is a couple things. One is that it turns out that they don't hate all ads. They just hate the ads that are more intrusive. And then secondly, they understand. So we already talked about these users. They're tech savvy and they're well educated. So they understand the value exchange. They understand that for their favorite publisher to continue to exist and thrive, they either need to subscribe or they need to view ads. So these are the reasons why a publisher.
Tim, actually, could I jump in there with I have a couple questions about that. First, do you think ad block users are more concerned or, let's say, annoyed with formats, or are they more worried about data collection and targeting practices?
So the studies show and the research shows that they're concerned with both. However, what is a bigger factor? The bigger factor is actually the ad units themselves, the formats. So it's obviously anything that they would consider intrusive, something that kind of slows down their online speed, their browsing speed, or just interferes with the overall consumption of their media. So I would say format.
Very interesting. Now, of course, we're talking a bit about the acceptable ads program, and I'm wondering how many ad blocking users actually participate in the acceptable ads program.
So there are approximately 200 million ad block users who are opted into acceptable ads, and that's globally. But I think one key takeaway for publishers and what they may not understand is that approximately 90% of the ad block visitors that come to their site are opted in to receive an acceptable ad. So they can go ahead and serve an ad to approximately 90% of their ad block visitors. Make sense?
Oh, yes, and I think that's a great segue into this next session.
Great. So we talked about why they're valuable to publishers and brands. So what are the options for engaging with ad block users? Of course, we can do nothing. That's always an option. But there's two other options I want to talk about. One is the messaging, and the other is through the acceptable ads delivery of ads. So we're going to talk about, and I'll give you some different examples of between a soft wall and a hard wall, and then I'll show you examples of acceptable ads. The first example is from the New York Times. And in this particular example, after you've viewed a few different articles, eventually they're going to put a hard wall in front of you, and they're going to ask you to either log in or subscribe. And if you don't subscribe, then of course you can no longer view that content. So that's considered obviously a hard wall. Another example of a hard wall in this particular case is the Times of India. In this particular case, the ad user, the visitor has an ad blocker on, and they're asking the user to turn off their ad block user. If you don't turn off your ad block user, then you can no longer view the content. So again, another example of the hard wall. Now I'm going to show two examples of a soft wall. This is by Wired, and they're asking their users to sign up for their daily newsletter. However, if you don't provide that information, you can simply click on no thanks, or you can X out and you can continue viewing the content. Same thing with this next example. Again, they've identified that the user has an ad blocker on. They've asked the user to whitelist or to turn off their ad blocker. But if they don't, they can X out and they continue viewing the content. So these are the user messaging options. They can provide value, but they also interfere with the user experience. So there's one more option. It's called acceptable ads. And this is the option that allows publishers to serve ads to their ad block users, as long as these ads meet a certain criteria. And by the way, this is the solution that is currently being utilized by the biggest publishers online. So what is this acceptable ads criteria? It's basically an ad-like advertising experience. So these are, if you can see on the left, these are IAB standard ad units, but they're static instead of animated. So there's no video or no animation. In addition, some of the criteria includes that ads cannot represent more than 15% of the page above the fold. They cannot represent more than 25% of the page below the fold. Here's two examples of publishers using acceptable ads. So on the right, that's Forbes. This is their homepage. On the upper right, I've circled this user has an ad blocker on. And at the same time, this is a Salesforce ad that's being delivered to this particular user. So again, it's a simple static ad, but it's a way to generate incremental revenue for the publisher. And in the lower left, this Game Zone ad, that's on Reddit. And again, the ad blocker is on, but we're able to serve a static ad to this ad block user. So at this point, we've reviewed both the messaging and the acceptable ads options. And of all these examples, we believe that serving an acceptable ad is the most valuable solution because it achieves three things. It respects the user experience, it allows brands to engage with a special demographic, and it opens up a new source of revenue for publishers. In addition, we discourage publishers from using a hard wall for three reasons. One, only the most loyal or engaged users will subscribe or register. Two, less engaged users will go elsewhere to find the same content. And three, once a less engaged user leaves the publisher site after facing a hard wall, she is less likely to return. So in this particular slide, I have a lot of information, but I also want to point out that this data comes from a recent Forbes study that they did with EdgeAIT. And so I'd love to be able to share this, and I'll email it to anyone who's interested, because it is a good study and it gives some good insights between serving a wall versus serving an acceptable ad format.
For sure. I think we can definitely, if I can interject real quick, Tim. Yeah, I think we can send that out in the post-event materials. We also talked a bit about that on AdMonsters.com when we had an interview with Frederick. Very, very interesting study. So before, I've got a couple questions for you, but I also want to send out another survey asking the attendees if they've actually tried to engage ad blockers. But that great question came in that I'm kind of curious about too. Trevor Abbott asks, does acceptable ads work with uBlock and other ad blockers?
Acceptable ads consists of the leading ad blockers. The only exception would be uBlock Origin. There is actually a uBlock that's different than uBlock Origin. So does it work with uBlock? The answer is yes. Does it work with uBlock Origin? The answer is no. But the acceptable ads is a feature being offered by the majority, I'd say about 85% of the leading ad blockers.
All right, and I have some other questions about the acceptable ads committee itself. Who's on it, and how do you decide what practices are acceptable?
Sure. So the acceptable ads committee, it's an independent nonprofit committee, and representatives of the committee are from publishers, they're from advertisers, agencies, privacy advocate groups, and then also consumers themselves. And so they meet once a quarter, and they determine what is this criteria. So, and you know, the concept overall is similar to Google's Coalition for Better Ads, but when you see Google's Coalition for Better Ads, it applies to really kind of the masses, the mass consumers, and the mass publishers. Whereas this, the Acceptable Ads Committee applies really to a very sensitive group, a very select group, which is this ad block user demographic. So it has to be even more strict than the CBA.
So with that, why don't we bring our special guests in here? We've got Jason Dubin from Playwire to start off. Jason, tell us a bit about Playwire before we dive into the meat.
Sure, Gavin. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks to AX and AdMonsters for having us. Real quick, so my name is Jason Dubin. I'm the CEO and founder of Playwire. We've been around for 14 years. We actually use the term revenue amplification. So we kind of have a phrase we call RAMP, which stands for Revenue Amplification Managed by Professionals, and that's really what Playwire does. A lot of companies claim to do what we do in our space, but they're really more optimization companies, where we're actually amplifying it. And what I mean by amplifying it is we're taking our 25-person direct sales team and doing programmatic and PMP deals and direct deals. We have a data management platform. We focus on ad recovery. So when I say, we don't optimize, we're amplifying. And we do this for about 450 websites globally. Some of the sites range from Party City to Barnes & Noble to Overwolf to Fandom to Collider and NASDAQ. So we work with Fortune 500 sites all the way down to blogging sites.
Excellent. So before we dive into engaging ad block users, is there any advice you're sharing with clients to help them through the lean days of the pandemic?
Yeah, the data that we're seeing is about 24% of all advertisers paused their spend from March into April. Another 46% are postponing or pushing their campaign. So if you add that up, about 70% of all media budgets are shifting in some way. We saw less of a decline in March and April, so a very big decline in April 1st through 15th. However, we are seeing things tick up both on fill and CPM in the last 5 or 6 days. So I would just say hang tight, people, but they are planning. We have over 20 upfront meetings with direct advertisers over the next 30 days. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I just think we all need to be patient, but it is going to course correct.
I'm so sorry. I got a little too overzealous with my mute button. You work with a wide variety of pubs. What publishing verticals tend to be most affected by ad block traffic?
Great question. So, Playwire really was founded 14 years ago, believe it or not, as the first ad network for video games. So we really have our roots in gaming, even though we become more ubiquitous and more agnostic in the ecosystem. We work with every kind of site today. But I would say video game sites have probably the highest percent of ad block. One, they're the most savviest users. They're probably, the users skew a little bit younger, so they're a little bit more understanding of how to navigate that world. And as you said, that they're very picky about what they have on their screen. So they don't want to have intrusive ads, and they want to control that experience. So I would say gaming and entertainment are probably the two biggest verticals affected.
Are there other verticals where you see less of a presence, but still enough that it's noticeable?
I would say we're seeing less on sports sites. We're seeing less on news sites. Those are the ones, and we also work in the retail vertical. So I would say retail sites also don't have as high a percentage as AdBlock comparatively to gaming, which, as you said, AdBlock ranges from anywhere from 10% to 40%. Some gaming sites even go over 40%, honestly.
Whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Do you ever calculate how much revenue a publisher is missing out on because of AdBlock users?
Yeah, so absolutely. Recapturing revenue is a big part of our strategy, and we could talk about revenue amplification, right? It's what can we add on? What other tools can we bring in to help increase revenue for the publishers, right? So if you look at what Playwire does, right? So every technology out there is to buy media as cheap as humanly possible. Whether you're a DSP or an SSP or an agency, your job is to buy as cheap as possible. We're on the other side of the table saying, no, you're going to pay market price, and we're going to hold you accountable to do so. So that's really what Playwire does. And as part of that, you got to have a solution to recapture revenue for that ad block.
So after integrating some kind of strategy for re-engaging AdBlock users, how long does it typically take for publishers to see a revenue bump?
It's pretty much almost instantaneous, honestly. So once you put up the code on site, you should have a decent flow of advertisers almost immediately, depending on the partner you pick, right? So we've gone through a few different ad recovery partners or revenue recovery partners, and they're not all of them are equal, right? So when we look at who we want to choose, so we work with so many sites in every way, shape, and size. We need something that was very, I use a term called simple and scalable. If it wasn't simple to use and it wasn't scalable for us, it's almost impossible for us to use. So that was a very big factor in determining which partner we go with. And AX kind of checks that box.
Huh. Very well put. Well, so thank you so much for that input. I'm going to turn to the other Jason. How are you doing today, Jason? It's wonderful to have you back. What are you focusing at the post these days?
So I run programmatic at the Post. Just recently joined our commercial team where we're commercializing the products that we're building for ad tech, and then taking those to market. And then I'm running kind of our business intelligence group. So really focusing on data, making good decisions about the Post. And it's been keeping us pretty busy over there.
No, I imagine. So would you mind describing how the Washington Post engages with its ad blocker traffic?
Sure. So we actually use one of the non-recommended approaches. Right now, we actually show a hard wall to users, and you basically have two options. You're asked to whitelist or subscribe. And that's kind of been our strategy, and we've been experimenting with different messaging over the course of the past 4 or 5 years. And that's kind of where we are today.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that this choice was driven mainly by or what effect did having a subscription product have on that choice?
So it was interesting for us. So for example, if you had an ad blocker on and you're able to subscribe, we allow you as a subscriber to continue consuming our content without ads. We don't have an ad light experience. And so where it's left us at today is that the vast majority of AdBlock users on our site are subscribers. Now, we know exactly I'm not saying that it's a large percentage on the Post. I know what the percentage is. But of that population of users, we tend to see a pretty good amount of users. It's definitely it's in the tens percentage-wise, but it's not like, 100% successful by any means, but we do see a lot of people who tend to whitelist on the Post. That could be tied to the brand name and what type of content they're looking for. But the rest of them, we don't see any sort of statistically significant uptick in terms of if you're an ad blocker, a subscriber rate looks different between an ad block user versus a non-ad block user. But we do, like I said, we generally have a larger percentage of our ad blocker audience is subscribers.
Very interesting. So, is ad block recovery on the table at all for the Washington Post, or are you going to stick with the hard wall approach?
It's always a discussion point for us. It's something that we're willing to test. Just keep in mind that like we have to treat our subscribers better than anybody else, right? They are paying us. They see value and utility. So the types of conversations, and this has actually come up, and even recently, like, you know, should we be doing this? The question always comes up is like, what is that going to do to our subscribers, right? Because again, this isn't a mixture of like a large audience of users that are just consuming our site. There's really no way for us to say, let's see what happens if we test it on the non-subscriber group, because like I said, the people who generally click through are people who are subscribers. And since we care about them the most, we care about like, you know, will there be a shock to the user experience if they all of a sudden see ads? Should we be communicating with them about that? These are all questions we're actually walking through. We've been talking about. We haven't made a decision on it, but it's not that it's at all like out of the realm of possibility.
That's very interesting, and as I think you know, the AAX people and Playware can tell you, I mean, it's always on the table and something that you could potentially add. I really appreciate that perspective, Jason. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So Tim, I think we're nearing the end of the presentation. You want to go and take us home?
Yeah. Let's take it home. I did have a comment for Jason at Washington Post, but we can do that in the Q&A section.
No. I think, you know, since it's fresh in our minds.
Yeah. So I just wanted to follow up, Jason, because I think, you know, what the Forbes study showed is that hard walls don't work for those publications that don't have a high percentage of engaged users, and I think, you know, you know better than me and most of us, but there's probably only a certain number of publishers that can utilize successfully a hard wall. And I think Washington Post and New York Times, Spotify, others can kind of can engage, you know, have such a high engaged users and the content is such high quality that then you can ask them to subscribe as a hard wall. But it's interesting because, and I'll send you this report afterwards if you haven't seen it, but when you do give them, the benefit of not giving them the hard wall is that they continue to consume more media. And it's, even if they weren't engaged or as engaged, over time, they become a more engaged user. So I'd be interested in knowing it's like, when do you give them? So I know that, for example, you get a little bit of taste of the Washington Post, right? So I can view maybe 6 different articles before I get the hard wall. But so I guess what have been some of your studies that, based on how much media do you let consumers or visitors or non-subscribers consume before you hit them with a hard wall?
Right. And like I said, you know, part of what I think plays into it for us is the brand, just as you were touching on. And the reason why I think, like, you know, our use case isn't necessarily going to be the same as everyone on the calls is that for us, the AdBlock users on our site are highly engaged, right? They're consuming the most amount of content because they are subscribers. So there's just a little bit of different considerations on our end. More than happy to see the study. That's always helpful. But like we just have, like I said, for us, it's a little bit unique, I think, than what you might find in the rest of the ecosystem.
Well, if I can just jump in, I think there's a great tip that you just shared there is really all publishers need to be taking a look at the consumption habits of their AdBlock users as they take a look at solutions. I mean, too often we just kind of leap, but I think that's great advice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. If you do have that ability, you should see what they're doing, right? Because like that'll inform what kind of strategy you want to do. And yeah, like I said, going back to the beginning, like AdBlock recovery for us is not off the table. It's something we are actively discussing. You know, it's just, we've got a lot of things that we're building and a lot of things we're experimenting on. So it's just a matter of prioritizing it for us.
Yeah, sure. All right. Well, thank you guys for, that was a great back and forth there. Tim, take us home.
Yeah, so we did leave a Q&A section after this, and before we get to that, I will just kind of finish up on the presentation. So over the past 30 minutes here, we've talked about different solutions. Obviously, one solution is serving AdBlock users an acceptable ad, and then the other options include utilizing a soft and hard wall strategy. I'm a little bit biased because I work for AAX, but we believe that AAX is the most sustainable option and will generate the most amount of revenue for publishers that want to monetize this additional 20%. And what was interesting is that when Gavin was introducing this today's webinar, he was talking about why AdBlock users would be why it's worth contacting or why they're valuable. And throughout this presentation, we try to talk about why they could be some of a publisher's most valuable consumers. Because we showed data that showed how these users consume more media and they subscribe at a higher rate. So this is a 20% that's extremely valuable, and we offer you one way to really kind of engage with them and then monetize them. So for any of the publishers out there, this is my plug, but to make it easier for you to participate in acceptable ads, we're going to waive our fees for the first 3 months if you sign up before May 31st. So Gavin, that's my plug. And then I'm going to move to kind of overall Q&As.
Excellent. And you know what? We got some good ones that came through the pipes. The first one I'm going to put out there comes from Ed from Weatherbug. What percentage did you say that the average ad blocker would agree to acceptable ads? It was 90%?
Yeah. Hey, Ed, how are you doing? So it is, I did say 90%. And one thing that, when I talk to publishers for the first time is I distinguish between an ad blocker and an ad filter. And over the years, ad blockers are moving out of the ad blocking space. They don't want to block everything. And so what they made a product decision, and that was to add this acceptable ads feature into their product. So over the past few years, when AdBlock users are installing an ad blocker, they're installing it with this acceptable ads feature on. And you can see it in the settings. There's a checkbox for acceptable ads, and that checkbox is pre-checked. And because it's pre-checked, 90% of AdBlock users over the past few years are keeping acceptable ads in place or on. That's why it's such a high percentage, and it's 95% of AdBlock Plus installs. So 95% stay opted into acceptable ads. And only a very small percentage, because the consumer at the end of the day, they have their controls in the settings, but I think it's only 5% actually go back and opt out of acceptable ads. So that number is 90%.
So there's also a great question here from, I hope I'm saying the name right, Joko from, I think it's Ringier. You were chatting a bit about, the mobile AdBlock users are growing. Do you have any numbers about ad blockers on mobile devices?
Yeah, so that's where the majority of the growth is coming from. Obviously, everyone is consuming more media through mobile devices, but the strategy is a little bit different because it's more around partnerships with the browsers, because the browsers now, all the browsers, they want to make sure that they offer the safest experience for their users, and that's part of the browser that's how they're selling themselves. And so the AdBlock companies are partnering with the leading browsers, and they're offering that ad filtering technology. And so, for example, one of the biggest ad blockers is partnering with Microsoft, the Microsoft Edge browser. And then there's another one that's partnering with actually Samsung devices and partnering in enabling this ad blocking feature capability within the Samsung default browser. So There is a big concern, obviously, about speed, about privacy, and about making sure that there are not too many intrusive ad units and ad formats in the mobile experience. So they're definitely playing a bigger role in that ad blocking space on the mobile side.
Got another good one from Jeff over at ALM. How do advertisers qualify for the acceptable ad designation? Do they need to apply, or is it automatically reviewed?
Well, we partner with, so we act as an SSP. So we have our own exchange, and we partner with all the leading DSPs, and we partner with SSPs as well. And so a lot of what we're doing is we're working with brands, with agencies, and their tech partners, making them aware of these users, why they're so valuable, and their willingness to receive ads that meet a certain criteria. And so that part of the education, we want to make sure we see more ads that meet this criteria. And at the same time, we also have our own technology that will review the different campaigns, campaign IDs, and we'll be able to use our technology to make sure that only those ads that meet the criteria are being served on our publisher's sites. If there is an advertiser or brand, an agency, of course, we'd love to work with them, and we'll make this inventory available to them. And there's a bunch of different ways to do it.
Yeah. Excellent. So we're getting into some of the more technical weeds. I like it a lot. John from the FT asked, are there any limitations to targeting on AAX? Are we able to layer our own ad tech for audience and contextual targeting in there?
So yes, it's again, we do operate as an SSP, and so we do enable cookie-based targeting. We do cookie syncing. But it's important, obviously, that the publisher adheres to GDPR or new California guidelines. So just like any SSP, we're making sure that we adhere to all of the industry best practices. So, but the answer is yes on these users right now.
Very interesting. So, you guys consider you guys are an SSP. So, I mean, what are integrations like? I mean, are there any typical practices there?
Oh, I'm sorry, Gavin. Can you repeat that?
Oh, yeah, integration, a publisher integration with you guys. Is it as simple as throwing you in a header, or how does it typically work?
Yes, it is. It's basically it's code in page. It's a lightweight JavaScript. So it is a standard header bidding integration, code in page.
Excellent. So can a publisher optimize AAX to how? Actually, let me ask that. How does a publisher optimize AAX to drive the most revenue?
Well, that's I think we work with our most successful publishers and partners. They utilize a combination of sources of demand, and one thing about our technology platform is that we enable a lot of different demand options. So, for example, we as I mentioned before, we have our own exchange, and so we work hard to kind of help a publisher monetize their inventory, their AdBlock inventory, by bringing in our own demand. In addition to that, we also interact with your ad server with GAM, and that enables the publisher to serve their direct sold campaigns or utilize their AdX to monetize this inventory. And then lastly, we also will work and allow a publisher to kind of make ad calls or use their preferred SSP partner to monetize the AdBlock inventory. So the way that we can work with a publisher to increase the monetization is really just to make sure that there's all this different demand that's really kind of competing, driving up bid density, driving up the CPMs, and driving up the revenue. And so from our platform standpoint, we've made sure that we build comprehensive, robust platform.
So there's a question from Tom's from SetupPad, and Tom's, please jump in again if I misunderstood the question. Are there any kind of geo limitations with AAX, or are you all over the world?
Yeah, there are no limitations, but regarding geo, I mean, it's just ad blocking is a bigger issue depending on where you live and what your geo is. Mm-hmm. So we know that. So on average in the United States, ad blocking, so a publisher will see anywhere from 10 to 20% ad blocking. In Canada, it's more like 25%. And the same thing in France and Germany. So it's more like 25% or higher. So different countries are experiencing different ad blocking rates. But other than that, I mean, our capabilities are comprehensive. It's a global solution. So there are no limitations from our standpoint.
Cool. Now, I'm also very curious, how is AAX trying to improve its exchange? And are more formats going to become available in the near future?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, it's pretty straightforward from how do we want to improve. So if there's, we'd always want to incorporate more demand, more sources of demand. And then, so that's pretty straightforward in the marketplace. And so that's something that we're focused on. The other question is the Acceptable Ads Committee is always looking into new formats. Specifically, obviously a lot of publishers are asking for, what's the solution for video? And because it's obviously a lot of publishers generate their highest value and they're always looking for additional video supply. So I would just say there is no solution for video yet, but, we're looking at different options, like what would be an acceptable video format? From a pre-roll or mid-roll, or what would be an acceptable format? And is it, the ability to skip right from the get-go? What was it, a maximum 6 seconds in length? So I'd say that's up there in terms of what the Acceptable Ads Committee is looking at.
So I wanted to put it out to any of the speakers on the line. Do you think, especially AAX, because of what you've learned from all your research with ad blockers and the Acceptable Ads Committee, do you have any guidelines for offering ad light experience publishers could potentially take away? Well,
this is Jason. I'll answer. Just to say that we particularly haven't offered an ad light experience. There are certain little differences that we tend to do that are very minor. I wouldn't call it ad light, but we've done a lot of experiments around layouts and ad layouts, and we track engagement all the time. We are continually experimenting with that. In fact, that it never ends in a good way for us, but we are always optimizing our site to see if we can get better engagement and try to find, essentially the top of that revenue curve, the best experience between both engagement and, engagement with ads. So we're always working on that.
Good practice. Well, I don't see any more questions coming in from the crowd. There were some great ones. Thank you guys so much. With that, I think we're going to wrap up, but I want to direct again AAX's offer. Jump in by May 31st and 100% revenue share to you. I want to thank all my speakers very much for coming on today. It's been a very insightful afternoon, and very excited. We'll definitely send out that New Jersey Institute of Technology report. Absolutely great information in there. I normally, I'm used to normally doing these at live events and asking for claps. So I'll just give a quick golf clap to everybody on the webcast right now.
Awesome.
Thanks for having us, Gavin. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Gavin.
Guys, thanks so much.
Terrific. And as for the rest of you, we will be in touch with details from the presentation. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you at the next webinar. Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye-bye.